As a Christian, what is my relationship with civil government? Must I submit to all the laws of the land, even if it goes against my Christian beliefs and what I'm supposed to do as a Christian? Must I pay taxes to a government whose leaders advocate ungodly ways? Must I obey the speed limit laws if I want to go faster or if I want to go slower? Jesus helps us understand our relationship to government when he was asked the question, is it right to give tribute unto Caesar or not? Jesus answers that question in Matthew 22 and verse 21, that we are to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. There was an audience there that was there to entrap Jesus when they asked Jesus, is it all right to give, or is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar? There were the Pharisees and the Herodians. The Pharisees were separatists. They advocated upholding God's law. They were not going to compromise with any law, especially a government that was in place going against them and his people. Herodians, on the other hand, they gave in to Caesar. They're willing to give in to his laws and compromise. So either way Jesus went, he was going to make someone angry that day. Jesus perceived of the wickedness of their heart. But he said, show me the tribute money. Now there Jesus is connecting tribute taxes with money. Whose image or superinscription is upon that coin? They could look at it and say, Caesar. Render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, tribute money. But Jesus didn't stop there, did he? He said, render unto God the things that are God's. And so we begin to realize that there is this relationship that we have, that we understand things about that belong to God. What are the things that belong to God? And I would say everything. Jesus helps us understand this when he faces Pilate. He said, don't you know that I have the power? I have the power to be able to put you to death or release you. And Jesus responds in John 19 and verse 11, you have no power from that which is from above. All of God's power is in place. But there is a place in a derivative sense where Caesar came into play, where we could pay him tribute money. This opens us up to what Paul says in Romans 13, 1 through 7. That we're to be subject to the powers at hand. And we are to be involved in doing that because there is no power but of God, and that which is ordained of God. So civil government is ordained of God. It all belongs to God. But in a derivative sense, the government has its place where we submit to them. In fact, in verse 2, that if we resist the ordinance of God, that which is created by God, government, then we are resisting God. And he goes on in that chapter to say that we are to be involved in honoring the government because of their place. What is their place? They're praise to them that do good. They're to be avenging the man who does evil and doing so with the wrath of the government upon him. That's its place. That's the work of the minister of God as the government is concerned. Therefore, two things he suggests in verse 6 and 7, not only suggested, but says we must do. Give tribute to him, and we are to honor him. Honor the place of governmental rulers, because we honor God. And we're to give tribute unto our government, pay our taxes. That's what Paul is advocating. This is similar to what Peter says in 1 Peter 2 and verses 13 following, where we realize that he says in that passage that we are to be involved in rendering honor to our government officials. We're to pay our taxes. We're to honor them. We're to be subject unto them. And I think it's interesting in verse 13 that we find that we're to do that for the Lord's sake. Verse 16 says we're free, but we're also bondservants of God. Therefore, as bondservants of God, we're going to submit to the government that's in place by the ordinance of God, or the creation of God, for our good. And Peter emphasizes that. It's a praise unto those who do well. It's a avenger of those who do evil. And therefore we begin to realize its place and what our responsibility and what our attitude should be toward government. So therefore, we're to give tribute and custom to the government. We're to honor the government officials and their role as a government. We're free, but we don't use our freedom as a cloak of unrighteousness or wickedness. We're bondservants of God. Therefore, Peter says, we submit unto the government. But see, we're not to, notice in that passage, he says we're not to be involved as we honor the king, we're to fear God. So fearing God is going to be in place over what a government authority would do. For example, if they tell us to quit preaching the gospel, Acts 5:29, the apostles reacted this way: we must obey God rather than men. So government has its place, but when it begins to bring forth demands upon a Christian, upon anyone, but especially a Christian, then we're going to have to resist. Why? Because there's no power but of God. And we'll submit to the government in its place under God's power, but when it contradicts and demands of us things that we cannot do and serve God in doing that, we must resist. So when we think about that relationship, we pay our taxes, we honor the governmental role, we honor its leaders as they fulfill that role, we give honor to them, we pay tribute to them, and we realize we do that under the power and the authority of God. So we pay our taxes. We obey the speed limit laws. We're obeying the laws of the land. Now my question is, what about immigration laws? That's a big idea tossed about, and what we're going to do as a country. What is a Christian? How does a Christian react to immigration laws, especially those who want to enter into our country? Must they submit to those laws? A lot of people who enter this country, they enter illegally. And if the government does not punish them, they feel like it's therefore legal. Well, let's notice two passages from what Paul says and what Peter says. In Romans the 13th chapter and verse 5, we're not to be fearing the government and honoring them and submitting to them just because of wrath's sake. But he says, but also for conscience. Peter says we're to do things for the Lord's sake. We're to do so out of conscience. The reason we know that people are here illegally is because they break the law. That's clearly stated. But if someone does not, as a police officer, he does not give you a ticket because you break the law, does that make it legal? No. And our conscience knows that. A Christian is living on a higher plane than just fearing the wrath of the government. And if he gets by with it, it's therefore okay. He's doing it on the basis of his conscience. He does what is right. And that's exactly what Peter says. By doing well, you put to silence the ignorance of foolish men. In 1 Peter 2, in verses 13, 14, and 15. So those two areas is on the mind of the Christian. That's how we react to civil government. And what we do, we'll do well. We'll do what is right for the Lord's sake and for conscience sake. There should not be any issue among Christian brethren concerning illegal immigration. We should do what's right and do that for conscience sake. So what's my relationship to civil government? I subject myself to it and to its laws, all of its laws. But when it demands of me something that I cannot do as a Christian, or that contradicts the demands of God upon me, I will always submit to men. We must always obey God rather than men. But in other things, we will honor the king as we fear God. We'll pay our tribute, we'll pay our taxes, and we'll even obey the immigration laws because we're Christians living in this world as citizens of a heavenly kingdom, but we're law-abiding. We honor the government, we pay our taxes, we submit to all of its laws. Thank you for your time and for viewing this video.